this movie is so gnarly. One, for the cinematic time capsule for what it achieves, and combining elements from, I guess you could say, three classic horror franchises, but taking it further than any of those ever went. It allows the audience to participate in a way that hasn't really been done before. Like, we're invited to study the frame as we follow Johnny through the woods and around the camp and listen more intently as his or others step around on the camp. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just some new slasher film. Like, it has something to say and something to be observed, as noted in the final conversation of the film. Is there anything that you gleaned about the darkness of humanity, or is there anything about this experience that shook up how you carry yourself through your day to day?
Not necessarily. I mean, being having done like a bunch of horror stuff and gone to some really dark places in the past, and knowing like the practical effects process and filmmaking and everything. It's something you're there for, and this it's such a surreal film in a way that it doesn't for me personally. When I walk away from it, it's I'm in the suit, so I know the whole time that there's no real threat there. I'm the one watching all the practical effects slowly get pieced together and seeing the magic of sort of that how that works. So I kind of get to walk away from it and just like admire that whole aspect of it. But I mean, it's a whole other thing for someone who's looking on the outside of the glass and hasn't seen that whole process.
Mm,
A much darker thing.
right.
Yeah, I think like it was I think back to filming and I have nothing but like happy thoughts, which I know sounds so weird. But it was just such a great team to work with. So the experience itself was incredible, but living in that world was definitely I mean it was dark, it's terrifying, especially for my character Chris. Like she has to go through a lot of trauma in
Right.
the hour and a half that we see her. And I think I actually was talking to a friend about this the other day, but it's really, thinking about how sometimes in this world, being alone as a woman in specific situations are quite terrifying.
Right.
And you really get to see Chris go through that on a whole other level.
Yeah. And more on the fun side of things, are there any classic horror films that you'd like to see receive this Chris Nash treatment, where we get to see even more of the terrorizer's perspective in the quiet in between moments like this?
That is such a good question. All
Yeah.
I'm thinking about right now is Final Destination, and I'm like, oh, how cool would it be to see it from Death's perspective? Like that
Mm,
could be quite interesting.
That's interesting.
What do you think, Raj?
Um, I want to see Bruce the shark from Jaws. I want to see his perspective. I want to see what he does on the day to day. Is he out there in the waters just watching everybody and waiting? Is he like is he following the boat around? That'd be fun to watch. I don't know if it could be a feature though.
yeah. Like, is it more like animal footage like, or is it like a calculation? Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a
Exactly.
documentary.
Yeah, it's just a shark.
Sorry.
He's just swimming around.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what Johnny is, right? He's a shark in the woods.
That's true. Right, I feel like there's so much to discuss about your performance here, from the sighs and grunts that Johnny does, and there's not a lot, but there's few, and I clocked them, and how he walks through things without flinching, like the tree branches, and how artful and calculated his kills are, to the almost machine-like, I don't know, machine-like savagery he has, especially during one particular scene that Chris is witnessing. She witnesses a series of brutal blows to another's body, and Johnny shows no signs of showing down until there's nothing left. So where to begin with all that? I suppose I could ask, what element served as your launch pad in the development of your performance, and what was the foundation of Johnny, and how did you and Chris build upon it with all these things that I mentioned to make Johnny this wholly unique killing machine?
Well, a lot of it off the bat was just chatting with Chris Nash about exactly how and what Johnny was. and paying homage to the classic films that we love,
Hmm.
but not copying and not fully stealing either,
Right.
kind of creating this amalgamation of all these different elements. And then personally, to kind of add my own flavor to it, and just and speed and motion to it, I watched a lot of animal attack videos actually too,
Mhm.
specifically bear and you know uh, wolves and cats, large any large animal basically, because they have this sort of serene nature to them when they're out there and just and doing their thing. But the second they switch into attack mode, it's just this whole other beast. And their motion changes everything. It turns into like this chaotic, just violent nature, I guess. But yeah, that was a lot of it, and just like sort of choosing those moments of when to kick that into gear, changing from the Johnny in the woods walking without, he has motivation, but it's not specific in that moment. And then when that moment changes, all of a sudden he becomes this other thing. So that was kind of a lot of that.
Yeah, yeah. And to make a killer in a movie, a horror movie's presence feel towering, it takes a performance that taps into that fear and anxiety with tremendous effect. And Andrea, like your performance is incredible in doing that. The sequence of you slowly setting down something without breaking eye contact,
Mm.
running through the forest and staring deeply into the trees to see if anything's there. I almost feel like we could create a college course on what you do within that scene of you witnessing those series of blows. That numbness, that subtle casualization of chaos that you show in your performance, like it haunts me. So first I must ask, are you okay? Because you carry, as you mentioned, all the fear of the film in the same way that Marilyn Burns' Sally in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre does, and that can't be an easy feat.
Thank you. First of all, that's very kind of you to speak about in such depth. I am okay.
Good.
uh, I think the beauty of the start of that sequence is I remember talking to Chris Nash, the director, and he was like, "Yeah, you're watching this friend of yours, you're watching this happen to him, like it's a really terrifying moment." And we were just talking through the feeling of it. And I was like, yeah, don't worry, I don't think I'm gonna have any issue feeling scared in this moment.
Yeah.
Because Bry's performance as well, and witnessing it, and the our prosthetics team and special effects, like they were just incredible in this film. So really they made my job very easy. um and I think there is something, what's so funny is watching the film with an audience, every time that scene starts, there's chuckles from the audience,
Mm,
from me slowly going to put down this can, and I think it's because they're so uncomfortable with what's
yeah.
happening. There is this, like, palpable feeling of, uh sorry, I just remembered a lady beside me when we were watching it this weekend. She was like, "Girl, what are you doing? Run! Like, why are you going so slow?" But I think there is this, like, weight to it, and in the moment, it's like, "Oh, I'm tapping out." Like,
Yeah.
I can't keep going. I have to save myself.
I don't think it's like a deer in the headlights type of thing. That's why I say it's like a numbness. Like she's just totally fixed on the moment, but she's also trying to be a bit strategic in the way, because most of the time when we see these kinds of films, they run away and then there's a crack of like a branch or something, and they're like, oh well, there goes that. And so I
Yeah.
feel like there was a bit of a calculation and strength to her that people probably didn't realize, or were kind of shocked that it unfolded that way on screen. So that's
Yeah, you
great.
don't typically see that in that type of character, right? I
Yeah,
think it's such a yeah, it was like an acceptance, but you're right in saying it was a calculation as well.
yeah. So often with horror films, you hear actors discuss the purposeful distance they put between each other in portraying killers and victims. But just based off this conversation, y'all seem really tight. So I feel like there's such an interesting connection between Johnny and Chris that I can't really articulate it, but I'm seeing them existing in parallel in some way. Like perhaps it's this power of mind that we were just talking about and the power of physical strength. I don't know, but I feel it when I'm watching it. So, was it important for you two to connect on set, or did distance create magic somehow?
I'll let Rye speak to this. He has a really funny story about this.
Well, yeah, I mean, off the bat, well, because for one, a bunch of the film was shot ahead of time,
Mm.
before I came on board, and then they realized there was a bunch of issues, you name it, in every aspect. They just had so many problems and issues. They had to kind of start over again, and they cast me in the role of Johnny, and so everything was reshot. So some of the cast already kind of knew each other, and they were friends, and then I came into it, and I don't know what had happened before, but I decided that, if it was going to help at all to kind of distance myself, and to be, this unknown person in the suit, that if it would help, I tried to do that. I tried to distance myself from them, for the first, at least the first block. I think I was successful, and then they're all such great people. We just,
Yeah.
you end up getting along. You're doing these long days with crazy blood and prosthetics and uncomfortable, mosquitoes and black flies everywhere. And you just, eventually it kind of just happens. And next thing you know, we're at a bar doing karaoke together, and and
Yeah.
In the
and laugh.
suit?
So
Yeah. Could you imagine?
Yeah. I really want to see this disc release get like a photo gallery of y'all just goofing around. Like I want to imagine Johnny eating a sandwich or something. Like I want to see a picture of that.
So good.
there's
I just found a picture of you, Rye, in the suit doing like a hang loose sign. It made me
oh
laugh.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There's definitely some of those out there. I don't know how many of them there are, but there's definitely some.
Good, good. I know we're just about out of time, but speaking of magic, I don't want to get too much into how the sausage was made, but when you have moments in this film that produce some, as we've mentioned here from the experiences that y'all had at sitting in the screenings, like some pretty loud and vocal reactions, and there's some long takes that make it feel even more real and immersive. Like there's one shot that's a long take, and I have you see the actor moving, and then all of a sudden something happens, and you're like, how did they do that? I I got to have some insight, but without spoiling what happens in those films, big and memorable moments. How do you clear a path in your head to create naturalism on those days, because they're like the darkest plunges into wickedness, and they also are, likely involve a lot of technical methods to pull it off with such precision.
Yeah, a lot of it is exactly that. It's technical, and designed ahead of time, sort of a puzzle piece. That's what you play in the big picture of the thing, and so you kind of have to just fit into that puzzle piece for those specific scenes. And when there is a moment to put your own physicality, or a bit of a, flavor into something, you do that, but you don't want to take away from what the scene is. You don't want to,
Mhm.
distract from what the point of the scene is too. So you kind of got to play that role, and yeah, very technically just be a part of what the practical effect is, what the camera's doing, and what everything has to be, and just be consistent with that.
And I think sometimes uh from the perspective of the person receiving the whatever
Yeah, that's a
from
different
the
thing.
receiver, I think it actually helps to jump in and out, to have like for myself, it can be really tough to sit in a moment like that for a prolonged period of time, which happened during the car scene. That was a really tough day because I had to sit in a lot of trauma that day. But I think it actually helps to, yeah, just to cut and get out of it a little bit and shake it off and then go back in.
Animals don't get too hung up on reason. They just keep killing.